I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing mask mandates, Dr. Fauci, and criminal behavior across the United States. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
As of right now, this second, doing great.
Good to hear.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Had a nice power outage over the holiday weekend with PG&E. Apparently somebody ran into a pole, so they were having a worse day than we were. But it went on for quite a number of hours.
Nice. Sounds like you need a backup system.
Definitely need a backup system because the current system is not working, and we have run into this issue multiple times where we have lost power.
Must only be one pole with one wire going to your house. No backup switching, no backup wires.
Nothing, apparently, because that is what we get. Nothing.
Nuttin' from nothing
Nuttin', honey.
equals nuttin'.
Nothing plus nothing equals nothing.
Nuttin'.
According to San Francisco, there is no crime in San Francisco. Everything is good, nothing to see here.
Well, if you ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist,
Then your stats say there's no crime.
then your stats say that you're at zero crime.
But if you're a San Francisco shop owner who gets brutally beaten by a robber and unfortunately you pass away, I think the family's going to say there's a little bit of crime in San Francisco.
I would say from looking at the videos, being on YouTube, other social media outlets, and the regular news, there's lots of crime there. There's lots of people that have to fear for their lives every single day. They have to fear for property loss. They have to fear for damage and destruction of their homes.
But it's all right. Just keep defunding the police because police aren't going to help you. You have situations where you end up defunding the police, and what happens after that?
Crime goes to zero.
Because there's no reported crime.
Yes. See how that works? They've got this system down.
We see it in San Francisco. We've seen it in Austin, Texas. Austin is having a heck of a time as well because after the defund the police movement started, they did in fact defund the police. So there are calls that people make to 911 that go unanswered despite the severity of the situation.
I did notice when people that tend to lean to the right talk about crime in blue states across the country, people that tend to lean left say, well, there's states like Texas that have the same issues. What they fail to do is complete the sentence is it is the blue run cities in the red state that is the problem, and that would be Austin.
Yes, Austin is a blue city, and then you have El Paso, also a blue city, and in fact, Joe Biden found the time to go visit El Paso. Of course, they cleaned up the streets, and they made the immigration problem look almost non-existent when they went to El Paso for that photo op. Then you have East Palestine, Ohio. 7 months ago, they saw the train derailment followed by the decision to burn the spillage there, which contaminated the water and hurt the surrounding communities. 7 months ago, Joe Biden still has not visited that site. He managed to take a break from his vacation to go out to Hawaii. He managed to take a minute to fly down to Florida for another photo op. East Palestine, Ohio, can't be bothered. Doesn't have the time in his schedule. Has 2 vacations in the same month of August, but doesn't have time in his schedule in 7 months to visit East Palestine.
Well, maybe if one of his handlers tells him that he's already been there, or maybe they've already told him he's been there, so he doesn't feel he has to go because he's already been there. Yeah, he went through Hawaii for a few minutes to talk about a kitchen fire that he had, and trying to compare that to massive destruction in Lahaina on the island of Maui, when obviously there is no comparison, one. And number two, the kitchen fire, I believe you brought out the point last week. It lasted a few minutes and it was not a major incident.
They contained it in the kitchen. He claims, just like he always seems to do, he takes something that it's bad, it's sad, I'm sorry that the incident happened, but he takes this small kitchen fire and tries to say, oh, I almost lost my cat in my Corvette, oh, woe is me. Tries to turn it into something bigger. I almost lost my house. No, you didn't. People actually lost their houses. They lost their friends. They lost their family. People lost their lives. And somehow you almost losing your prized Corvette is on par. That's just you trying to identify with the people. Just like when a military member dies and he will say, I lost my son Bo in Afghanistan. When Bo died here in the United States, it's very sad. He had brain cancer and he passed away. But he tries to elevate all of his life circumstances to being worse than what the other person's going through. He fibs, he lies, he misconstrues, whatever word you want to use, but he repeatedly does it. So I almost lost my cat and my car in a house fire that was contained to a kitchen.
It's interesting that people are finally starting to pull the covers out off of him, because he is not this middle-class simpleton Joe that he tried to portray himself over the years. And you even have some senators and Congress people that have pretty much been around almost as long as him, not quite. And they're coming out now and saying that this man has been like this his entire adult life, pretty much his entire career in politics, which has been most of his life, that this is nothing new. And I've been doing a little bit of, not soul searching, but a little bit of introspect into a Biden presidency and actually how the presidency would really look if he had full command of his faculties and he was actually the one running the country. Because we know full well by what we see in the public's eye that he's lost it. They're just using him as the Weekend at Bernie guy that's still living and breathing to be a figurehead and function as well as he can until they run out the clock for the next 2 years. And I strongly believe that even Democrats, if they didn't have who they have for number two, and it was somebody different, they would be demanding that he be removed from office.
So who could they have put in as VP that then they would turn around and say, yes, we accept that person as the president? Who do you think could have gone in there? And then the second part that I want to kind of throw in is, do you think that if they had put a strong VP in there, he wouldn't have accepted it, and neither would his wife, because they know how weak he is?
Possible and possible. At the time before he bowed out, believe it or not, they probably could have put Buttigieg in there as a VP candidate, and he would have been able to help garner votes. But the VP candidate doesn't normally bring enough votes to do anything in a presidential election.
It's almost like they want to have someone who's known enough but not too strong.
Right. And they could have pulled him in there, and I'm not accepting of him either, but the alternative to Biden, Buttigieg, would be better than Kamala. And not saying that in her own realm, she's not a very smart person, but in this world, she's way over her head. She's either way over her head or she plays the part really well of a person that does not have command of herself either and can't articulate and throw 3 words together without botching it.
Well, she can throw 3 words together over and over and over again to the point where you have no idea what she's trying to say, because she will only throw 3 words together to make an entire paragraph worth of information.
Right. And that's very unfortunate that we have a populace of a few 100 million. We're supposed to be the springboard for everybody around the world to look at and want to emulate us. And right now, nobody wants to emulate us. They basically want us to go away, go in a closet, leave them alone. But like I was saying, and I'll get back to, is I really wonder what the presidency would look like if Barack Obama and the people that are backing him weren't the ones that are pulling the strings for the Bidens right now.
For pseudo Joe.
Yep. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the Obamas are pulling the strings. No doubt. Even if it's through Valerie Jarrett or one of the others, they are dictating the policy. Because if you look at Biden's previous policies when he was trying to get legislation passed in the Senate and the way he talked, I don't think that some of the things he's doing now with this climate change, whatever you want to call it, climate change, Mother Earth is resetting herself, whatever, that he would be going down this path and this road.
He seems to be different now than what he was in the 90s. So it does appear that somebody else is giving him what to say, pulling the, or doing the ventriloquist thing almost.
Right. Well, he said it himself many a times that he's got to watch what he says or he's going to get in trouble.
Yeah. How do you get in trouble if you're the president?
Correct. And I would be angry if I had my full faculties about me and I made a decision and I made a statement before half the world's leaders, and then within 10 minutes, somebody from my office is coming out and saying, no, that's not what he meant to say. He meant to say this. Well, he should go back and give him a tongue lashing and come back out and say, no, what I said is policy. You guys follow me. I'm the leader. So let's move forward.
Yes, agreed. But keeping on all things Joe. So we have Mr. Pseudo Joe has been caught. I don't know if you want to call it red-handed because they're still trying to get the actual emails, but has been caught using pseudonyms to send out emails. 3 different ones so far that we know of. But in using these emails, what would the purpose be? It's your own email address, so you don't want the public to ever have a right to know the record? Or for me, what are you hiding? Because so far they've identified at least 5,400 emails that they now have to ask Obama and Joe Biden, do you agree to release this, or is there a national security reason or something else? So he can still hide it. But 5,400 emails, and they're saying at least 1,000 of those, he was conducting business with his son.
Yes, and 200 of them, they have already claimed executive privilege and hid them, so you can't see them.
Right. So what kind of privilege do you get to have where you get to say, you cannot look at my wrongdoings, but somebody else, I don't know, Trump, sure, turn it all over, give it all up. He doesn't get to claim any sort of privilege at all whatsoever.
It's because the left-hand leaning side has learned how to play the game better. They've learned how to get the judges in the right spots. They've learned how to take these departments, and I'll use the term that everybody else uses, weaponize. They've weaponized departments that are supposed to be there for the people and to help you and to prosecute real criminals, like the current sitting president and his family. But because they've had a history, a lifelong history of working together and patting each other on the back and paying each other off, that when you have an outsider like Trump that comes in and makes statements that he's going to clean the swamp and all the other terms he's used over the years, this is what you get. And right now, I believe this is a tit for tat going on here. Biden's group is saying, we're stronger than you are. We have better control. Therefore, we're going to throttle this guy and we're going to go after anybody around him in his inner and outer circle. And as long as you continue to pull emails on me and on my son, and you continue to look at banking transactions and figure out that I am a real crook, then I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing while you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. He does get to have not just executive privilege, but he is of the right class of people to have all the privilege.
Well, and that's the thing, and I believe you're the one that brought it to my attention at dinner the other night, or maybe lunch, that if he's using these fake names, then that should take it out of the purview of being looked at by DOJ, and he should not have executive privilege for those emails and those pseudonyms. That should have to be released, just like any other non-public figure would have to do. Heck, I tried to post a Craigslist posting or an offer-up posting for some yard sale stuff, and because there happened to be an animal in the picture, inadvertently, there was a cat walking across our lawn, and you can't sell animals on those two sites. They pulled my ad, saying it didn't meet their community guidelines and standards. Something as simple as a cat.
Wandering in the background. That's
Wandering
not
in
even
the
your
background.
cat.
It's not even my cat. So it tells me that I don't even have executive privilege to continue to sell my product.
And just to be clear on these pseudonym email addresses, so one was done not out of the office of the president, but out of a different part of the government. And so if it's still a government email, but not the president's email address or the vice president's email address, as it were, other government officials are FOIA-able. Other government records are FOIA-able. So if you are not running or conducting yourself out of your privileged account, it really should no longer be covered under privilege. My opinion. So they went and used it out of a different one of them out of a different government account. Why does that get executive privilege?
Well, and you're right, and you know full well that we can all answer that question. Is he was trying to hide the fact that he was with his son doing business, strong-arming other countries and other leaders of corporations for money.
Right, and as soon as he was forwarding government records to his son, a non-governmental employee, it should lose its privilege.
There you go. And even if it didn't, how many of those were confidential, classified?
And he gets to claim
Secret.
privilege and not get investigated?
Right, and his son being, well, was he a government employee at the time? Did he work for HUD? Did he work for some entity?
Not unless it was when he's appointed to some special group, because they appoint all their family members and friends and donors, etc. So unless he was actually an employee, but let's just assume that he was, then unless they're talking about directed government business, he still should not have privilege.
Correct.
Because then it becomes a public record on the other side. On his son doing business, everything in government, unless it's protected, classified, confidential, whatever, is FOIA-able. You
Yes.
talking to your son doesn't automatically make it not a record.
No, and everybody knows full well what this is, from his fellow Democrats to all the Republicans to all the lawyers to all the other politicians, that this was quid pro quo Joe, and they were strong-arming people. He was running a criminal organization out of, almost at the White House. He's probably doing that now as a president, but when he was at his vice presidential palace as well, he was running a strong-arm tactic business from there. They know it. According to all the people that have been around him, he's been doing this his entire career. This is nothing new. He's just never been caught and exposed to this magnitude. And this all goes down to, I think, Rudy Giuliani, because I believe he's the one that originally released info about
The laptop.
and then it became, oh no, that's fake news, and we all know where it went from there.
Right. He ended up with a copy of the laptop after the FBI refused to do anything about it, and ultimately they ran out the clock on a lot of the stuff that they did find.
And that's partially why they're going after him as well, is because of what he did to Uncle Joe's son and them. I think we ought to just maybe put boxing gloves on all of them, just let them jump in the ring and
Do a Elon Musk versus the world sort of thing.
Absolutely. Let's just do it that way and handle it. It'd be a lot cheaper. We could actually sell tickets and actually make money instead of having to pay money to prosecute these people.
Lots of money, millions of dollars spent over all of these individuals. And then when we have something significant, it feels like they don't do anything about it, and the impacts to our country are negative. So we have Maui and what has happened in Lahaina with the fire. They get $700. I think they might have even upped it to $1,000. I've heard some dealings, but they send billions of dollars to foreign countries on a monthly basis, but we can't seem to be bothered to take care of our own. Now, Florida's been hit. We'll see what they end up doing there, but billions of dollars. And then the corruption that goes on in Ukraine, which is money disappearing, equipment disappearing, equipment going on the black market for sale. We have a backer of Zelensky getting arrested for what he was doing, and yet somehow we're still supposed to send billions of dollars to Ukraine. We don't take care of our own.
We should revamp this entire system to where everything has to be done on a vote. You can't just let 300 to 500 people send 350 million people's hard-earned money abroad just because they feel like sending it to do good for someone. When I agree with the Ukraine thing, because we've got nothing but a war that's killing people there. It's a border dispute again. These border disputes in Europe and around the world have been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Yet it's bankrupting us. I can equate it to me driving yesterday and looking at all of the new housing that's going up here in the Fresno Clovis area and looking at the roads that they're paving to put all these new homes. And I know this is kind of a weird comparison, but we have a municipality here that cannot maintain the roads we have now. These are the worst, broken, cracked, potholed roads probably in most of the Central Valley, right here in our community. Yet we're bringing in thousands upon thousands of more people. So we send them tax dollars for roads. Where does it go? We send billions to Ukraine, to Palestine, the Palestinian people, to others. Where does it go? Like you said, it's corruption. It disappears into this hole. So why should we continue to send money that we really don't have? We don't have this kind of funds to be sending that to Ukraine.
We're in a deficit. Despite what has been claimed, we are not bringing in more money than we are shelling out. And when you are broke, is that the time to go into more debt?
Well, see, our governments think they can just continue to print money, so it's okay.
You can want to help anyone and everyone that you want to help in life, but if you do not take care of your own household, and the broader picture would be the entire United States, if you do not take care of your own household first, how are you going to take care of the rest of the world?
Yes, if you're not healthy to take care of other people, it'll never work. But, looking at places like Ukraine, you just brought a thought to mind, is I wish we're privileged to be behind the scenes so we can see what went on months and a couple of years prior to Putin invading Ukraine. Not only this time, but when he took the other parts of Ukraine, Crimea a few years ago. What we were doing behind the scenes to put the proverbial stick in the beehive and pound it around a little bit to tick off the leader of Russia and them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not backing Putin and his people. I know nothing about them other than what I read in news media outlets and what I see on TV. But I don't know. I'm rambling, but when are we going to stop it and actually take our money and bring it back and take care of the homeless, take care of the people in Maui that are getting a whole $600 or $700 check, when their homes, because of the cost of living there, were probably valued at $500,000 or more, and they probably didn't have the insurance to cover them. So this is going to be a prime time for big investors to come in, wipe all those people out, and where are they going to end up? Right on the beach with all the others that live there in tents, or they're going to be caught up and swept up in this homeless cycle.
And things that we need to do here at the homeland would include securing our own border instead of spending billions of dollars to help Ukraine secure their border. We here in the United States are not securing our border. They are welding open the fences at the southern border so people can freely come in and pass. They have caught individuals connected with ISIS helping to smuggle people into the United States. They are lying about the sheer volume of people that have been coming through, that continue to come through. And then we see the breakthrough situations where in New York City they're complaining that there's too many immigrants being dropped off, or in Chicago they're complaining that there's too many people being dropped off. And even in Los Angeles has now voted, the city council has voted to investigate how migrants are ending up in Los Angeles and whether or not it is a criminal offense. So they're voting to move forward with a probe against Texas over their migrant busing program.
Yeah, apparently they just sent another bus full of migrants, and they are not happy there in Los Angeles, so they want to sue Texas now,
saying that they believe that it's a criminal offense. If we are busing people to Martha's Vineyard, ultimately they ended up in Rhode Island, and we're busing them to New York, and they're ending up in Florida, and they're ending up in Chicago, and they're ending up in Colorado. They're going to all these places. I would say we have a problem.
Yes, and L.A. County their city council was willing to vote on the 9th of June to formally establish the city as a sanctuary city. So they should be happy that Texas is sending them people to fulfill their sanctuary obligation.
Right, because other places they would fare much worse.
Yes, just because we elect people to be council members and mayors and supervisors and congressmen and women should not give them the right to do things like this and have a vote to authorize a sanctuary location when it goes contrary to your laws and the judicial system as set up over the course of the last 200 years.
Right. So they're saying that they're not going to work with the feds. And even California has said they're not going to work with the federal government over federal immigration violations. So why do you work with the federal government over any other violation of law?
Right.
That would make it a multi-tiered justice system if you're willing to pursue certain charges and not others.
Well, not only that, the second there's a natural disaster or something that happens, these cities and the states will run to the federal government crying like little babies, asking for federal assistance. We need FEMA. We need money. We need help. We need this. Well, wait a minute. Like you just said, if you don't want to work with the feds with your left hand, why do you want to hold your right hand out and ask for money?
True story. But they do, and they will continue, because every time something has happened, California has wildfires, they're right on the doorstep of the feds. Hurricane hits, right on the doorstep of the feds. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Take care of yourself. And then they could probably stop sending money to the feds too, saying we're going to take care of ourselves.
Apparently a representative from Minnesota, Dean Phillips, is trying to let the dogs out. He says anybody that wants to run against Biden in 2024, please come forward and take a chance.
Do it.
What he's saying behind the scenes, I'm sure, is we're tired of this old fart who can't remember his last name half the time, I'm sure, until they give him whatever wonder drug they give him to wake him back up. So run in 2024. You can do it.
Well, our conspiracy theory is that it will be Newsom and Michelle Obama, or at least one of the two. Why is Newsom running ads in other states and going on speaking engagements that make it appear that he's trying to garner attention from the public?
It's gaining traction, that's why. But if people had a half a brain, which I think most of America does, and they open their eyes up and they look at the state of California and look at the abysmal record he has had during his terms, anyone would be foolish other than his Aunt Nancy to vote for him.
Well, if we followed his system, which I believe we did, we should not have a worse homeless crisis. We did what he said to do. We followed his little plan, followed it out of San Francisco, followed it into California, the whole entire state. And yet somehow all of his transformations, the amazingness that he was going to bring to all of California just did not seem to materialize. Between New York and California, so many people have fled that now they are seeing deficits, especially in California. We are not bringing in as much money because the base is gone. They have left.
And that's why they want to tax people after you leave for 10 years. It's like, wait a minute, you're going to tax me, and then I'm going to go to another state, and that state's going to tax me. And, well, I guess that's why they call it JOB, Journey of the Broke. These people have really figured out how to juice the system and how to take as much of our money as they possibly can, haven't they?
And then they want to say that the real victims are the people who are in jails and prisons and committing crimes, so we need to focus on them. So there is a current California committee, a Democrat-led committee, that has advanced a bill to allow killers who have been serving life without parole the chance at requesting resentencing so they have the opportunity for parole. So you want to let killers out. You want to say that people who commit certain crimes shouldn't be really considered felons. You want to commute sentences. You want to lessen degrees of criminal behavior. Now you raise the amount of money somebody can steal before they're considered to have stolen enough to even warrant being looked at. And magically, they are the ones that we need to focus on and feel sorry for and spend more money, time, effort, energy on. And the way we're doing it, let them free. Let them do it again. Let them keep running the clown show.
Yep.
And in California, they're also trying to legislate the First Amendment out of existence. There is a bill that, if passed, it would solidify the criminalization of parents at school board meetings if they disrupt it too much. So any substantial disorder is how it's termed. The parent can face a fine and jail time for up to a year. This is SB 596. You don't have the First Amendment rights in the schoolhouse. So all of the disruptions that have gone on with parents trying to take back the education of their children and say what they want to see in the classroom, they're now trying to call that substantial disruption and criminalize First Amendment behavior.
So they're trying to make us like Canada, eh? So you don't have any type of free speech rights?
You don't. Not in Canada. They want us to be more like Canada, because we're already seeing in Canada, there is an individual who is a psychologist, Mr. Peterson or Dr. Peterson. He wrote on social media some of his beliefs, and so he had ended up with the psychologist board trying to take away his license, saying he needed to be re-educated because he wasn't allowed to think those thoughts, and the court upheld it, that he's not allowed to put out those thoughts, even though no claims that he did it with a patient, like the information that he was putting out that he harmed a patient, hurt a patient, no patient complaints. But because he had certain levels of thinking that isn't aligned with what Canada wants, they tried to strip his license.
Yes, and now he's been ordered to go through a retraining camp, and he's going to do his level best to make sure that 100% of everything they say to him
is
made public. Because I don't care what kind of rules, regulations, and laws they have up in Canada. Here again, I'll throw that. Whose right is it, because they think they're more superior than you, to come up with rules like this that say a fellow human cannot speak their mind? because maybe what they're saying is not right or correct and what he's saying is. Go look at that. They should go duel metaphorically and let him speak his mind in front of this board and explain to them that maybe, well, he probably has because he's a super smart guy, that they're wrong, he's right. Just like the First Amendment, like you said, who are these people up in California that think they can vote parents' rights away? We're the ones that elected them, not the other way around. Doesn't give them the right to stomp on you. Well, you're almost getting ready to get me to go on a big tangent here.
Well, we can tangent all we want. So if you'd like to go on that tangent, go on that tangent.
I have to be calm for a few more days.
Continuing with Canada, though, and what Canada has done, and we see something in Canada, and then there will be people here in the United States that say, let's follow what they're doing. So a Canadian father was thrown into jail for the crime of misgendering his daughter. So he claims that his teenage daughter is gender confused, and he was divorcing his spouse. He misgenders his daughter, says that his daughter is still his daughter. So because he will not identify his daughter as his son and misgenders the daughter, he was thrown into jail and given a 6-month stint for the crime of misgendering. So all you have to do is not agree with the conversion of your son to your daughter or your daughter to your son, and that can get you sent to prison in Canada. If you say that Jordan Peterson has done some of the same things, that we should be treating people if they have other mental health concerns, and instead you are only allowed to affirm whatever somebody says if they are gender confused and they had no indication of that beforehand, and maybe they had other issues that you had been treating for years leading up to that, and you're like, I don't think this is your issue, I think you might have another one. They want to stop doctors from even being able to say that.
See, and this is where the land of the few are trying to take control of the land of the many. When you have something that's less than, I don't know what the true percentage is, but I would say it's probably less than 3% of the population has these issues, why would the other 97 have to capitulate and comply with what they have to say or what they have to do? How about maybe I'm right, you're wrong? So in Canada, it's a law. So freedom of expression in Canada is protected as a fundamental freedom by Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which was passed, I believe, under this young man's previous predecessor, which was, I believe, his dad.
Mr. Trudeau.
Mr. Trudeau, not, this new whatever he thinks he is. I think he thinks he's a Chinese dictator, because that's how he runs. That's how he runs the country.
He does.
So in practice, the charter permits the government to enforce reasonable limits censoring speech, hate speech, obscenity, and defamation are common categories of restricted speech. And that's fine. That means you don't, like us, run into a theater and yell fire when there's no fire. You don't say obscene things to people that hurt their feelings or obscure their opinion. Well, that should work both directions. But it seems to not be right now. And I believe a lot of this stuff is slowly going to start correcting itself, because the 97%, I would bet, are getting tired of it.
It would appear that you are correct, that the 97% are getting tired, and there has been pushback in different areas. Not just that particular area, but in other areas, people are starting to stand up, which is why they are now pushing bills to take away people's rights, because they are actually standing up for themselves. We see it in the state of California with some of these bills to restrict your First Amendment right to speech, because the parents are standing up for themselves. Oh, you can't have that. You can't stand up for yourself. So they're trying to restrict it even further. But in California, where a school district socially transitioned a young lady without parental consent or knowledge, this California school district has actually settled for 6 figures for what they did, socially transitioning. Now, they said that the daughter identified it as a boy, was outwardly expressing this to the teacher, so they socially started calling her the boy's name and then acting in the manner as if she was a young boy. Didn't tell the parents. Parents had no idea what was going on. So they let her use the boy's bathroom, use male pronouns, and otherwise pushed her away from her biological gender. She was having such a mental health crisis. She ultimately came out to her parents that she was having a big problem, had a big problem at school. They decided to move her to a different school because the young lady actually said she didn't want to be a boy. The school socially transitioned her, even against her own will, telling her what she was, that she was a boy, and pushed her down this avenue. That's child abuse, in my opinion. And I could not imagine sending my kid to school and not having an open and honest dialogue with everyone who is leading my child's education, and where we think it's okay to hide anything about a child from the parent. Medical information, that social transition is also in the realm of mental health, so that would be medical. Where do you, who can't give my child Tylenol, think that you can address their mental health concerns?
Right. And yet the state will want to protect that school district at all costs, and heck with the parents, yet they mandate, on the other hand, that the parents carry health insurance for the child until they're 26 here in California. So that's another case where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and they're butting into affairs that they should not get into. And that's why when parents go to these school board meetings, because most parents are not gear setted to handle this kind of stuff emotionally, that they go off the deep end and they yell and they get angry and they tell these teachers things that they wouldn't ordinarily say, because there's an instinct, especially a mother gets when you start messing with her children.
Mama bear comes out.
Mama bear, and it's the maternal instinct kicks in, and the mom says, "You're not doing this crud to my kid. And if you have a problem with that, we're going to settle it another way." And then that's what gets the FBI involved, and it gets security involved, because
you get kicked out, you
Right.
get arrested, you get dragged out.
And that's not what the parents was ultimately trying to say or do. What they're trying to say is leave my kid alone, teach him math, English, writing.
And we are failing as a whole. We are failing at teaching reading. We are failing at teaching writing. We are failing at teaching math. We are failing those areas. So instead, what are we doing? We are focusing on social justice warrior status of the children and social emotional issues that somehow we think we can control more in the school arena, but it's also a social issue. And they still can't read, they still can't write, they still can't do math, and somehow we are in a better position.
Right, and I want to make sure our listeners don't misunderstand me or mishear me. I am not into the medical side of what's going on with an adolescent or a young teen or an adult. I'm not qualified to make those kind of statements or decisions. That is for the statement I am going to make, their parents, the child, and not the school district to decide on. So if a kid is a boy, wants to be a girl, or is a girl, wants to be a boy, let the family work on that. Let them decide how that's going to play out in their life. It's their business, their decisions, because the ultimate outcome rests in their hands, not in yours. When a teacher comes out and tries to tell you that you need to transition 15 years from now when you're on permanent meds and the other things that may unfortunately be happening to you physiologically and psychologically, they're not there for you.
They're not going to be the ones there for you. They're going to forget your name. They're going to move on. You're going to move on into a different realm. Where did that put you and your family?
Correct. And I guarantee you that the family, you pick up your phone and you call or you text them, they will be there for you. If not, your direct biological parents, one of your relatives will be there for you. You know who we've talked about 100 times over the last 3 years? Dr. F.
Dr. F word?
And do you know what a weeble is?
Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down?
Yes, you punch them and they jump right back up. This guy, even though he made mega mistakes, had the potential to be the superhero, but because, like the Bidens, had his own financial interests at heart, he's back in the news again. And exactly the statement you made 1, 2, and 3 podcasts ago about it's getting close to election time. Look out for the mask mandates coming back and potential lockdowns and all this other stuff. And
Conspiracy theory.
I'll be darned if he wasn't on the news this weekend. He's concerned that people will not comply if masking recommendations return, even though every scientific organization across the world, through study, what did I say 1,000,000 times? Got to have the empirical data. You have to do the studies. Don't go off one person is saying. Guess what? Masks don't work in the manner with which we use them. And they're not going to work this time. So I would hope that unless this next strain of disease that's miraculously making a comeback right before an election season doesn't go after people that wear masks. Oh, wait a minute. The CDC is finding out that it's not people that wear masks that it's going after or not wear masks. Believe it or not, it's people that have been vaccinated and boosted. There's something within the chemical makeup or something that it's done to your body physiologically.
That not only are you not naturally protected, but you're now not chemically protected with everything that you've injected.
And that was another peer-reviewed study that just came out within the last week that natural immunity trumped, the vaccine, and it also trumped the hybrid immunity. So we need to get off the soapbox with this guy. He needs to pack his bags, go away, and let the younger, smarter generation that actually does follow and knows the science help the billions of people across the planet.
He was a part of the top 3 people that had the most amount of influence over where money went and what studies got to get done. And so if you did not toe his line, your study did not get funded. But now that he is out and the Francis, I can't remember his last name, is out, some of the studies are actually getting funded and coming out. Now, there is a connection, putting it out there is a connection with masks being worn in a perfectly scientific scenario in which masking works and certain things do not pass from one person to another. But it is a constructed scenario in a perfect world of scientific opportunity. It is not the real world, and they are finding in the real world your cloth mask, your booby cup holder, your pair of panties that people were wearing on their face. As long as there's something on your face, it works. People are gross. I don't know if you've seen people in public, but they will touch their butt and then grab a door handle. They will itch themselves and then grab a door handle. They will stick their finger up their nose and hand you a $5 bill to pay for something. People are gross.
Yes.
And somehow masks work in that real world scenario is what we're meant to believe. Masking can work as long as you wear the correct mask in the correct way with the correct fitting in the correct scenario. Everything has to be perfect.
And that's what I've said this whole time. See, what did I say? When OSHA, who regulates masking in my industry, does a study and dictates to you what mask to wear, what works, how to clean it, how to remove it, how to put it back on, like you said, how not to wear the same mask every day for 6 months. I saw people do that in, we'll just say Costco. The mask was supposed to be white, and it was jet black from dirt. And then poor people were doing more harm to themselves because one guy who's making millions off of this scared people to death.
Yes.
Literally.
They found that hand washing did more for the general public than wearing masks did.
Yes.
And yet, where are our signs? Hey guys, we're getting back into cold, flu, and COVID season. Don't forget to use soap. We know you dirty people aren't using soap the rest of the year, but could you please use it from September to March?
Right. And see, here it is again, and I don't want people to misconstrue what I say again, because we've said multiple times or dozens of times, COVID was very bad. For some people, it was very dangerous. But just like any other malady, ailment, as I can tell you right now personally, can be potentially dangerous. It's how you handle it and how things get taken care of in the process. And we'll say it again, don't just go off of what one man or woman says. That's just one puzzle piece in the big picture. Make sure you have all the pieces in the box. So when you put it together, there isn't a piece missing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I do want to touch on a subject I brought up after, unfortunately, Maui and Lahaina was devastated. So locals had said, please do not come to Maui. This is not your tourist destination. Cancel your plans. And I did echo that sentiment. Locals are coming out now and saying Maui is back open for tourism, except Lahaina. Stay away. Don't come swimming here. It is not your photo opportunity. Please stay away so that way the locals can do what they need to do. They can continue to get to their houses if they can, look over their area, and start to recuperate from this great suffering. Go to the other areas. Maui is a bigger island. Obviously, it's a small island, but a bigger island than just Lahaina. So they are asking for tourists to come, but please do not go to Lahaina.
Yeah, they need it to be partially open because the state runs off of, 60%, 65% tourism, and that's all islands. So they need people to go, so there's funds to actually help funnel too.
And that's jobs. So people who did not lose their home and who still do have jobs do need to put food on their table. So that is their job too.
Well, this is how I would handle that. Simple fix. And I know they appropriate money based on certain laws, rules, and regulations, but I would take the next block of money that we're going to send to pick a country. Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Mexico, wherever we're going to send funds. And I would divert enough of that money to our state of Aloha to completely rebuild every single home in Lahaina. You know who I'd use? Look at my hat.
The CBs.
Yes. If there's no conflicts, no wars going on right now, I would hire CBs. I'd get all the CB battalions over there that are, instead of going on rotation and going to Okinawa or going to Rosie Roads, Puerto Rico or Spain or wherever they currently go, and all the detachments, I'd have the EOs, the equipment operators, bulldozing and leveling the lots, getting them ready to go, and I would have the builders there building. I would use Army Corps. I would use everybody to help rebuild that city. Why can't we do things within? Like you said, if you're not strong from within, you're going to be very weak without, so you can't help people.
Yes, we need to take care of our own.
We need to show the world how good we really are and exactly what we can do there in Lahaina to help rebuild. And I would say that's the same for Florida and for the town where the train flipped and devastated the waterways there.
East Palestine.
Yes.
And surrounding areas. I know it gets it gets us talking about it, but there were other towns that were affected.
Yes, we need to supercharge ourselves and we need to take care of ourselves in a hurry. Then you can look at the insurance policies, and whomever had insurance policies in the insurance company
can pay the government directly.
Can pay that check to the federal government. That'll pay for what the military did.
So I don't know if you remember hearing about this, but in Canada, so I'm going to jump back to Canada, but a different subject.
Oh, Canada. Oh.
There were claims that they found mass graves at the site of what were essentially old Catholic schools in which Native populations were forced to go get educated and change religions. And so people doing studies were running their equipment across certain areas, and they claimed to have found unmarked mass graves. And so they did an excavation project. It was commissioned by a Native American leader at the Catholic Church. And they had used ground penetrating radar. They went to multiples of these schools, and claimed to have found grave sites, mass graves, and they said children as young as 3. It was bad. Well, it was bad enough that it caused social unrest, and they started attacking religious institutions and even burning some to the ground. So after the claim with this ground penetrating radar of finding mass graves, they started this excavation. And they started it a couple months ago to actually excavate the sites, because you can't just go and start digging. There's a lot that you have to do to prep. So it lasted for about 4 weeks. And it was through the University of Brandon. Well, they found no human remains at one of the big mass grave sites. There were multiple articles that had been published off of these mass grave sites. So it was bad. It was really bad for religious people. And one of the papers that was first reported and claimed were 215 children, later downgraded to 200 probable burials. No children found. So what do you do when after this hoax, churches were burned to the ground, people were attacked, and even the leadership there in Canada, it's a very dark day for Canada, and we have to reckon with our history, and this is terrible. No mass graves.
Well, whoever did the ground penetrating radar studies, if it was a company, they need to go after them. They need to make them apologize, and I hope that they have very good insurance.
Canada even had a national holiday over the allegations. They did a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and it is celebrated every September 30th. So do you think on that day they're going to reconcile with the fact that there were no mass graves?
No.
Are they going to celebrate that?
No, they're going to try to make it go away as easily as it came in. Because unfortunately, you had somebody that jumped the gun, and they didn't do the studies first, and they didn't excavate first to see if they did in fact find bodies. Then once they find bodies, then you go through this whole process. You don't whip people up into a frenzy and tell them there's something there that isn't there. Because what are they going to say now, that somebody snuck in under the cover of darkness and removed all the bodies without anybody knowing?
Graves, yep.
The government has some new equipment that they can go in there and make things disappear without disappearing, without disturbing the land. Amazing.
Sad day.
Yes. It would be a sad day had it been true, and it's a sad day that it's not true, because like you said, churches were burned down. There was probably some people beaten, and there's probably a lot of things that took place there that didn't have to.
Correct. Did not have to happen.
Nope.
So I'd like to talk about an individual, segueing into current events of presidential races. Vivek Ramaswamy. So he is really getting his name out there. He is getting airtime on just about every single news organization. All of the media is giving him a lot of airtime. They're pointing to him, saying he is a big leader, leading the pack, leading the Republicans. So who is he? Some of the things that have come out is that he went to a Democrat town hall and asked questions in 2003 him and Pete Buttigieg. So it's just kind of an interesting coincidence that these two individuals would have been at the same Democrat town hall being able to ask their questions. But the more I watch Vivek Ramaswamy, the more I see him as someone who will just say what he thinks will get a soundbite or airtime. And in addition to that, with all of the time he has been given on other media organizations, MSNBC, CNN, anyone who he sits down with seems to give him this airtime that they will not afford to any other Republican candidate. And even some of these media organizations touting him as a leader and at the forefront, and the person you can vote for instead of Trump. If you like Trump, instead go for this guy. So why are they pushing the narrative that he is the instead of Trump person?
Well, because like you said, they want to siphon votes off of Trump right off the bat, but then they also want to divert attention from the Florida governor, because if he ever does get his campaign lit off and really jump-started going the way it went for him in Florida, then he will rise to the top quite quickly. See, they're picking their Buttigieg.
He's the Buttigieg of the Republican Party.
Yes. And it's interesting you talk about him because I actually watched he was a high school valedictorian, and I listened to his high school speech on YouTube because it's all over YouTube. And he talked so much and so long. I like to listen to people talking. I had to turn it off.
Too long for you?
Way too long for me. I like people getting to the point, not messing around. They don't have to tell me the same point 20 times. I get it the first time. And that's basically, he said the same thing 8 different ways to Sunday.
Another thing he's done is taken a page from Obama and even said some of the very same words that Obama has said about being a skinny kid with a weird name.
So basically he's pulled a Biden too.
Taking somebody else's speech and making it his own, or claiming it as his own. Yes.
Well, I guess as long as he doesn't say that it's his speech, it's not plagiarism, right?
I guess not.
Borrowing terms and phrases and reorganizing and recataloging again a little bit makes it his. Because he is a skinny kid.
With a weird name,
yeah. With a weird name, he is different.
Yeah, so another person running for president, Nikki Haley. So she has called the Senate the most privileged nursing home in the country. Mitch McConnell just had his second freeze up. She called that sad. But I thought it was interesting. The most privileged nursing home in the country. And I think that probably hits the nail on the head.
Sums it up.
For the Senate.
Sums it up. Those people think they're in there for life. I'll bet you some of them haven't had to even run the last few terms. They just put their name in the hat and people automatically vote for them. They don't have to do any ads or anything. It is sad, and you and I have talked about term limits many a times, and they're a prime example as to why you need term limits. And I would limit them to maybe 1 or 2 max. I wouldn't give them maybe throttle them down to, it's a 6-year term.
For Senate, yes.
Yeah, maybe I'd bring them down to 4, bring them down to 3, so they could serve 2 terms, and that would be equal to the old school 1 term. You can't have these people recycling. Their ideas are not new. They're not good. They just, hey, Democrat, if you vote for this time, I'll send, because we're in a majority, I'll send $100 million your way to your community. When you're in charge, you know what? I'll vote for your stuff. You send $100 million my way, and that seems to be what they do. It's a game of chess where they just help each other out. And I bet if you really sat down and looked at all the bills that have been passed, all the people that vote for them, they help each other out back and forth. Because the ones we actually see, where you see the news outlets say, oh yeah, you know, all 48 Republicans right now voted no on this bill. But it's the other 50 bills that they get passed throughout the year that you don't see, that they were all equal partners in, because it happens a lot. Congress does that too, because you ask them, oh yeah, we did a lot of legislation this year. We got a lot of stuff passed. Really? I only saw 2 bills on the news.
Yeah, we did so much, and it feels like so little.
And they get a lot of time off. I'll tell you that. They work really hard. They get the whole month of August off.
Their August recess. Well, sometimes they get called back for special sessions, but I really think that that's because they want more money.
Well, it's a
That's their
2-year
per diem.
It's a 2-year term, right?
So they run for 2 years at a time. So when they say the whatever session of Congress, so for our Senate, they run their time for 2 years, and then our House, they run their time for 2 years. But technically with the House, they only are elected for 2 years. So each one is a whole new session of Congress. But then with the Senate, they will be a new session for 2 years, 3 times.
Okay, so here's what I was going to get at. So like the company I've been with for quite a few years now, when I first started with them, the very first year I earned no vacation, 1 year of sick time. Starting on the second year, I started earning vacation, and I got a week for the whole year. Okay, so why should they come in under a 2-year term and get 8 weeks off just off of the August recesses? And I know somebody's going to say, well, it's because they have to go back to their districts and they got to go speak to their people and on and on and on. I get that. But they don't have to do it, because I think they get multiples. They get more than just that time off. They get a Christmas recess. They get a Thanksgiving recess. If they're running for re-election, they get to take time to go meet with constituents and go push their name again.
Right, and they only come back and vote if it's really, really important.
Right, so it's not like they're really working hard. Just saying.
Not for their 6-figure salary.
No, pretty cush job for 6 figures.
I would agree that it's a pretty cushy job for 6 figures. So.
And a lifetime of good stuff after that. Then they can become lobbyists and they can really make money.
Previously on this podcast, we talked about beef and how big a steak should be, whether it should be 40 ounces or not. Some say yes, some say that's too small. But a statistic that came out recently is that 12% of the population eats 50% of U.S. beef. Would you believe that?
Nope.
You don't believe that 12% of the U.S. population is responsible for 50% of all meat consumed daily?
I do not.
Well, it's mostly men between the age of 50 and 65. Apparently, they're a part of the biggest part of that 12%.
Still don't believe it.
I think that that's a pretty small group for a large amount of beef.
Yes.
Potentially, if you only convince 12% of the people to become vegetarians, you can stop 50% of the beef consumption.
Or if they're eating that much meat, things will happen to them physiologically and
they'll quit anyway.
They'll quit anyway. Let me tell you.
But Arby's has the beef. Do you think Arby's will go out of business?
I don't know, because I don't like Arby's. I've never eaten there. Well, I've eaten there once in 30 years.
It's not a favorite.
Nope.
Sorry, Arby's.
Yeah, nothing against you personally. I just don't like the way your food tastes.
So in another topic that we have talked about on the show, Jeffrey Epstein. The claim recently came out that the feds were aware of more than $1 billion tied to human trafficking payments. And they became aware because of the reports on what Jeffrey Epstein was both sending and receiving. Because if you spend over so much money, it's supposed to get reported to the feds. So according to CNBC...
Tell that to the Bidens, would you?
Right? According to CNBC, federal authorities were aware of more than $1 billion in human trafficking transactions at the time of Epstein's reported suicide. And the disclosures dated back 16 years. So an attorney representing the U.S. Virgin Islands made the revelation in a court appearance this past Thursday in Manhattan. And that was, she claimed that JP Morgan Chase notified the Department of Treasury about the transactions after Epstein died. And now Okay, so they notified 16 years worth of history after Epstein dies, although they should have been reporting on large-scale transactions during the time that he was alive and making said business transactions.
Yeah, but they were reporting on Hunter's transactions, yet nothing got done by the feds.
Yeah, so the bank was being sued by the Virgin Islands government for allegedly facilitating sex trafficking by Epstein of young women when he was a JP Morgan customer from 98 to 2013. And there's a lot of information that they divulged during this time, but payments of up to $1 billion of suspicious transactions.
Is this the same U.S. Virgin Islands that had something to do with FTX?
So they said that all of the Democrat donor money that he was getting investigated and indicted for, that they don't agree to the extradition, but that was Bahamas, not the Virgin Islands. Yeah.
Okay. So another island, different island nation.
Different island nation, same Caribbean family.
Mm-hmm.
Money makes the world go round.
Yep, it does.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.